All right, thank you for joining me. I still hear something playing. Give me a second. Maybe that's the feedback. Thank you for joining me. I actually had a total of 5 or more in another live that I created. All right, there we go. All right, so I had more people in waiting on the live in another frame, but all of my materials were in this frame. So I apologize for any inconvenience. I wanted to go ahead and say a prayer out to my ancestors who created me. May I speak through them always. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So when I try to walk this earth, I definitely try to walk in a way that they will be proud of. And then with the information that I am finding within my tree, especially the Aboriginal indigenous, I really, when they speak of a crown or, getting back up and tilting and upright walking, it just really means a lot to me. So at this point, I'm in a natural transition of hoping to do things naturally and taking in more of a more positive light. Not saying that I was in a negative light, but definitely making changes for the betterment of me and the environment as much as I can. All right, welcome back to my live streaming. This is my History Verified channel host, Lenora. I wanted to say thank you for tuning in. And I have 2 discussions for the channel today, and they are, 1, the Catoctin Iron Furnace, which would be a follow-up and an update for anyone that has been following me on TikTok. And for those of you who are new, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the subject again. Hopefully, it'll come to, I'll bring you up to part very quickly. The information is very clear. Second, I am also going to introduce my true ancestry new deep dive ancestor from the colonial Delaware slave trade. This is my first time hearing about it. I do have matches in Delaware. Some of these locations are not, some of these locations are new to me. Definitely Delaware. I didn't think that my ancestors came no farther from Mississippi. Come to find out, there's Georgia, there's Alabama, there's North Carolina, there's Virginia, there's Pennsylvania. So I became very shocked once I began doing the ancestry in Louisiana. There's Wales, there's freaking Jamaica, there's Barbados involved in my ancestral tree. So these are things that I didn't know about. The victim of the Delaware slave trade, I'm going to explain that to you. What I'm going to introduce will be is called the Avery rest. And we know when we say rest, that means burial. And with both of these two discussions, they are ancestors where remains of remains of ancestors that were found after the state or the Department of Transportation began to dig for, after claiming land, and they began digging, and they found these remains that no one knew were there, not even the family members of these remains. So I'll get more into that. But the Avery rest was around 1680 AD. If they tell us that slaves began to be brought over in 1619, then that is a good 60 years after that. So I'm going to get into that. It is also stated, and I'm going to cite the Hampton government, it's hampton.gov, that in late August 1692, and I'm going to bring that up, 20 to 30 enslaved individuals were brought over in 1619. Not a million, not 500, but a total of 20 to 30 slaves. Well, actually, they were Africans brought from the Congo, intentionally brought over for slavery. And of course, the 1619 project states that they were brought to Virginia first. Today, the area is now known as Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. On two different, the first ship was the English privateer ship called White Lion. And in Virginia, these Africans were traded in exchange for supplies, 20 to 30 Africans. Several days later, a second ship, it is quoted, days later, a second ship arrived in Virginia with an additional enslaved Africans in nearly the same amount. I want to point out that 1619 is not the beginning of slavery. It's the date of the first arrival of African slaves. So I just wanted to help you with a visual that our colonial ancestors, if you have any Africans, arrived after that time. I have indigenous ancestors that were already here. And you do know that those two ships brought over a plague. And the weather conditions were horrible. So the weather was bad for both the slaves and the enslaved, the indigenous, and the colonizers and settlers that came. So I think they were brought over in August of 1619. August of 1619, by November, they were having Thanksgiving. So if in August of 1619, only 20 to 30 were brought over, and by November, they were having Thanksgiving, there weren't a million slaves brought over in 1619. So that's just something I want to get you to think about. Now, Virginia We know that that is the first landing place of the Mayflower, Delaware, Virginia. I have ancestors, European ancestors, that also were some of the first to come over to the 13 colonies. They weren't the 13 colonies, but they were some of the original settlers. I also have ancestors that were the Aboriginal. And with this televising, you'll find out that I also, per True Ancestry, have African ancestors that were here as well. So the Catoctin Iron Furnace tragedy is one set of ancestors, and the Avery burial is another set of ancestors, and they both were found only after excavations took place of the land that was being broken up and in development for new roadways. I have this coming up. I don't know why it hasn't come up yet. All right. Here you'll see the Catoctin Furnace. This website is owned by the Historical Society. They are the archaeologists that began, actually, once the development was taking place, I think in the 70s, the late 70s, the Historical Society and the Smithsonian Society were called and asked to look at the remains and make a determination and then take over the remains. So the building of the Department of the building of the roads by the Department of Transportation ceased, and then there became a recovery of the remains there. I'm going to show you that this is the furnace that they actually, you guys still okay? This is the furnace that they actually worked at and end up losing their lives at, from a newborn baby to adults, both genders. The newborn baby was buried on top of a female, which is my ancestor too. And I'll show you how I'm coming about claiming these ancestors. I'm going to go into my True Ancestry, which is another genetic testing website. They actually don't do testing, but what I had to do was upload my raw DNA. I'm still waiting on this to come. Software is. Yep. So I'm waiting on this to show. I'm in the my True Ancestry software, which is a website where the raw DNA of my original sample, my original only sample, came from. Why is freezing? Of course, I can see the screen, but you all can't. I got two screens up. I don't see it on either one of mine. Sorry about that. Goodness. All right. Okay, there we go. I have already logged in my true ancestry. With my true ancestry, again, raw DNA was taken from the original sample that I did at ancestry.com. I uploaded it to my true ancestry, and with my true ancestry, they do deep dives of the of your sample. They go back as far as 1300 Ice Age. I think BC, before Christ. They go back way, way, way back. I have at least 21 samples from my true ancestry. And they are, the first one here you see in the red, in 1680. Well, that's the Delaware one. So I'm going to skip this. I'm going to go from there because I don't want to go into the Delaware samples just yet. I want to immediately go to the Catoctin samples that begin here. All right, so here is the very first one. It says 1810 AD, an enslaved adult female laborer, Catoctin Iron Furnace, Antebellum, Maryland. The genetic distance for me is 2.1. That's one ancestor that was lost in the iron furnace. And I'll go further into it. Then there was another one, enslaved adult female as well. Then another enslaved laborer. It does not say an adult an adult. It doesn't give the gender as well. Then there's another one that doesn't mention the gender nor the, it doesn't mention the gender. Again, remember there is a baby involved as well. There are teenagers. So they definitely pointed out the female, but as you can see, they haven't pointed out any of the males or the children. And the bodies were intact. So these are the bodies that were found in Maryland at the Catoctin Iron Furnace, owned by four brothers. One of them was the governor of Maryland. Now, how did any of the workers, when the archaeologists describe, I personally talked to Elizabeth Comer, who is doing the research for these findings, and I'm going to share with you her specific statements and also her emails that she sent to me. All right, so when I continue, as you can see, you do not see anything about any gender, and you can see that my genetic distance from that individual begins to increase. But there are over 21 of them who were laborers at this iron furnace. There you see one that's 16.79. All right, so I am going to stop there. There are over 21 of them. To describe the area of the furnace. All right, I'm going to switch out. Let's see. That's what I did last time. There we go. All right. This is the furnace. It was hot there. Under the conditions they were, the archaeologists explained it to me as it being they were working and they were skilled and they came specifically from a specific place in Africa. She claimed that they were just working and not enslaved. That's how she described it to me. But when I read more in her most recent emails to me, there's the stating that they were free Africans. And as you can see right here, they updated here where it says step back in time, explore the unique Catoctin Furnace living history village. The Catoctin Furnace Historical Society Incorporated commemorates, studies, and preserves the rich history of this historic industrial village, including the architecture, the cultural landscapes, lifeways, and foodways of the enslaved Africans, free African Americans, and European immigrant laborers and families. Now, anyone that is in tune with their Aboriginal, Indigenous, Amerindian side, we can go back and reread where it says enslaved Africans, free African Americans. We know that the term African Americans didn't come about until the 80s. I think it was like 82, 81 or 82, maybe 83. So where they get the term free or the label free African Americans, we know that that's a reclassification today from the Aboriginal. So that meant that Indigenous worked at the Catoctin Furnace as well, and European immigrant laborers and families. Now they say when they describe the Europeans, you see that it says European immigrant laborers. But they say enslaved about the Africans and free African Americans. So there is an update to the letter that says that the workers on the furnace may have all been free. I don't know how true that is. Many of them died with conditions of being overworked. So they didn't live to be 65, 70, 80. They actually died quite young, like 14, newborn, 13, 6. It is outrageous, the ages and the age limits upon doing this type of work. So we know that anything with heat is more than likely grueling, especially under oppressed or enslaved or slave driven, approaches. We know that this type of work more than likely was drooling. They die young. All right. When I think about the baby actually was biracial. That is noted that the baby that was on top of one of the ancestors was biracial. They make statement that the mom in the same casket, however, was not biracial or European. Right. So today after they broke ground and found the remains of all of these people, and I'm going to show you the different the actual burial grounds. And it's a layout of it. Yes, I can. Okay. I thought I could. But I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the emails. My first email, maybe if I do this here, let's see. Maybe I can. There we go. All right, you will be able to see the burial grounds now. They are tiny, but it is what the archaeologist Elizabeth Comer sent me regarding where the burial sites are. And the reason why I haven't went into what the emails are and what my initial call is, I just want to bring you up to part as to how this visual looks. Okay, this is the cemetery, Catoctin Furnace Cemetery. Let me see. Yep, I can't imagine. Waiting for it to enlarge on your side. Okay. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, how about that? All right, so this is the Catoctin Furnace Cemetery. It's located in Maryland. How did they get to Maryland? Pennsylvania via the route of Pennsylvania and North Carolina. So originally they started out in it was supposed to be in Virginia, and then I got noticed that they started out somewhere in Maryland. I mean, not Maryland, but Pennsylvania or North Carolina, which means that they probably were sold. The surnames that are involved with today's descendants, because they are looking for the descendants of the remains. And I was told that true ancestry, quote unquote, that true ancestry doesn't go back far enough for them to make claims that the 1824 remains can be matched to today's descendants. And it doesn't make any sense, because we know that that my true ancestry deep dives back to Queen Nefertiti. Okay, so we know that they actually are trying to single out, and I have been in communication verbally on the phone, pleasant conversations, but I do, bring up different arguments about how, one, that they're trying to eliminate the my true ancestry findings and or results, and two, as of I think about a month or two ago, I'm going to show you an email where they have they are now using 23andMe as the genetic testing site to verify the descendants of today. Once again, per Elizabeth Comer, the archaeologist that is in charge of the remains, she told me that the surnames are Patterson, Johnson, and Johnson, remember, is the governor and his three brothers that owned the Catoctin Furnace, and Patterson, Martin, and Johnson are three of the names. That's not all of them. The reason why I'm mentioning those three, it took me less than an hour in I think in October of last year, after speaking with her. It took me less than an hour to find who was my ancestors, and the names and the locations of Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Maryland. It took me less than an hour. I haven't written her back because I'm always doing something, but I'm going to show you the emails that she sent to me, and it will verify that we've had an initial 2 conversations, then after that, emails. All right, so this is the burial site. It involves mitochondrial DNA. Okay. These are groups of family members that were grouped together during the burials. So I don't know if they all happen at one time, but the dates given for their burial is 1824 AD. All right. I am trying to. All right. So we see that the gold color means a juvenile female, like number 12, 28, and 9. The burgundy or red is juvenile males. The dark blue or royal blue is juvenile indeterminate. Indeterminate. Okay. Green adult females. That's 11, 7, and 35 over here. That's a turquoise blue adult males. MAAR is excavations. I don't know if I think that's the entire width of the digging that they originally were doing for the roads. Over here, you'll see these dots. Those are old roads. They are grouped by family as well. I can go out just a little. They are also grouped by families. The pink here, and you'll see a circle around it, is group A, which is here, I believe. Group family B is this one. So it's 2, and that baby on top. You see the baby? There's a little red mark was buried on top of mom. All right, family B, that's family B. Family C is green. There's a total of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a family. Family D, 1. Family E has 2. 2 remains. And this dot here, well, that was the blue up there. Let's see. All right, it has those 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the dotted one has 1 possible family member that is connected to D, which is this family here. The rest are single adults that were working on the farm as well. Well, not farm, but the furnace. The reason why I'm bringing attention to this is one, because they are in my ancestral tree. They're actually trying to, again, locate family members because there are reparations involved. So you might know of anyone or can spread the information that there is a study going on of findings of remains of enslaved and free Aboriginal and Africans that were specifically, she stated that the Africans were specifically brought over here. So these remains are here. Reparations are being given, and they are in the midst of, they just verified those who definitely have tests at 23 and 23andMe. I don't have a 23andMe test. I only have my true ancestry, which is uploaded. So I'm kind of disappointed in some findings this week, but we'll see. All right, so this is the map for the DNA groupings of the family members. I will tell you this, they are in my maternal line, and I'm going to go there. So I'm going to go out of the burial site. I'm going to remove it and present my family tree. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Give me a second to pull it out. All right. I am in my tree, the tree that has the Pattersons in it. I'm going to go and view the entire tree. I'm going to click here, go to house. That brings me to all of my family members. I am going to do a search over here and type in Patterson. I already know who this is and which side. This is my mother's father's people. I hope yep, this is my mother's father. These are the ones that I know are connected to the North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. The McGaw, which is that name is intertwined with the Pattersons, the Martin, the Johnsons, the Noel, and the Noels came from North Carolina to Mississippi. They are in my tree. Those are my ancestors. So when I'm talking about the Governor Noel, who was at one point the governor of Mississippi, the Pattersons are all intertwined. So I know this by going in the documentations and looking at the surnames. And that's how I was able to break everything down. So that's the Pattersons. We saw the long, or maybe I want to go back in so you can show you the list of the Pattersons rather than. All right, so this is how the list of the Pattersons go. So that means that these are ancestors and, well, not all of them. They're ancestors and it may be their children. And then when you go into each one of them, you may find more children with the Patterson name. Now, Martin. And I'm not saying it's just because they're common names and, oh, yeah, of course, you're going to find them in there. No, they actually are intertwined. I've also been on family tree DNA to do some more verification of it, to find out who lives in Maryland or Pennsylvania. And sure enough, it brings it up. Not only that, the Tuscaroras were from North Carolina, and the McGaws, upon my research, are Tuscarians. All right, so there are the Martins. One of them was a Benford. The one that was at the top, that is a Benford. You know, whether they connected to them that way, I don't know. So Martin Benford. Don't quote me on this Johnson. Some of those Johnsons are definitely, I know who they are, and that is not the Johnsons I'm looking for. All right, so that's how you cross-reference with your tree. You go in, you search through all of the records. I had all of my stuff pinpoint when I found it 5 months ago, and then again in November. So I'm bringing it back up because of the emails that are being sent, and I haven't been able to contact her regarding my findings of the ancestors. So I'm going to take you back to the email, and then, all right. So it's ironic that in July of 2002, not sure if you can see that. Can you see it? Okay, you should be able to now. Let's see. Yep, there you go. It's ironic. If you see this email here, you'll see that it's ironic that my true ancestry in July 8th of 2022 began the actual results for the Catoctin Ironworks. I ignored it. I actually just opened it up a second ago when bringing it up for you. Didn't even look at it. Didn't open it. It actually had a blue dot there. I had never opened it. because I know how my true ancestry, my true ancestry emails are. They're introducing you to more findings. So that's the first email. All right. So I believe that I was in my true ancestry. And when I saw the DNA or the what we call deep dive ancestral matches, is when I began to do my own research regarding the Catoctin iron working. I call it tragedy. When I speak with Elizabeth Comer, I say tragedy. I use those type of words because I want her to understand that I know exactly what has taken place, no matter how she tries to soften it up and make it seem as if they were just workers who were specifically brought over because they were very good at ironwork. So after seeing this, and that I had over 21 ironworking furnace enslaved ancestors per ancestry, my true ancestry. What I'm up against right now, because I know that there is a 23andMe, has been a 23andMe experiment with collecting the DNA and analyzing the DNA that matches those that are at the grave sites. They have found over 280, I think it's 280 descendants. Over 280. My plans now is to take that 23andMe test. Perhaps I'll do it this week. Go ahead and order it, and then I will let you know what it is, what the results are after that. Okay, I don't want to, I'm going to go back into my emails. So after those findings, what I did was, I believe I contacted her. No, I went to the website. I went through the website. I looked and I looked and I read. It's like, wow. Okay. Let me take you on that website. So I looked and went and I read. So I'm going to start. Okay, there you go. All right, so I'm going to start reading where it says the analysis reveals ancestry, possible descendants of enslaved and free African scientists analyzed DNA from an African American burial ground located at historic Maryland ironworks. DNA connects 40,000 living Americans, not 240, 40,000 living Americans to enslaved Black ironworkers. Right now, they are about to pay reparations. The governor of it is, remember, this has been hush hush. This has been hush hush. A governor owned that land, and people died a gruesome death on his land, and then they were buried on his land. People's relatives. Now, how were there any relatives? Well, they must have been left behind when they separated them from the other states they came from: Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina. That means that they were taken from their families and no one heard from them ever again. So now they are paying reparations. All right. Go back to the email. So actually after going through the website, I went page by page, seeing what you know, just trying to figure out what was going on. First of all, the building is, I'm sure it looks smaller here than what it really is. And I'm sure with a full-fledged fire, it was hot. And it was gruesome. And it probably was, it was torture. If you look at the ages and the actual the testing of the remains, some of them said that even a 14-year-old had body damage, the curvature of his body, or a 21-year-old, whoever it was, they just named, and there was consistent amongst the people, the workers' remains. That's how bad the work was. That's how dreadful it was. All right. So I went into each one of these. There's a trail. There's a log house. There's a store. There's a blacksmith shop. There were also, I think, tests. They were talking about casting calls and all of that. They've already profited from this land and telling this story and making it seem like the work that they had was just okay. It just goes with the scenery. And that's just how the story always goes. They profited from it. So I am going to go back to the emails again. All right, so that's one email. That's after I think I signed up for the newsletter, and as you can see, the newsletters began to come in. There's one, there's two. All right. So by this time, I've spoken with, I actually looked at the telephone number on the website, and I began calling the archaeologist in charge. I got Elizabeth Comer, who is the archaeologist in charge. As you can see, this date here, it says February 2nd, 2022. I'll see if I can zoom in. Usually, nope, that's horrible. All right, so I'll read it. It says, Dear Lenore, it was a pleasure speaking with you. It was a pleasure speaking with you today. Here is some information that I hope is useful. As you know, the Catoctin Furnace Historical Society Incorporated is searching for the descendant community of the enslaved industrial workers who created the industrial wealth and power of the white owners in the United States through their skills and expertise. We began this search 9 years ago and found the names of 271 enslaved persons at Catoctin utilizing oral history and historical documents. This has been a very challenging process using available records. In the interim, we have created a collective kinship community in lieu of direct descendants, bringing the lost legacy of iron making and industrial slavery to students and visitors of all ages. Now, utilizing available DNA, we hope that it may be possible to make familiar connections between present-day descendants and their ancestors buried at Catoctin, exploring African origins, as well as following individual movement away from Catoctin Furnace. This is only possible because of the accident of history that resulted in the 1979 excavation of 35 graves threatened by highway construction, the careful curation of these remains by the Smithsonian institution over the past 42 years, and the expertise of the Reich Labor Laboratory at Harvard University in isolating the DNA of 27 individuals in 2016 through 2017. However, there are currently no reliable methods for identifying identical segments of DNA between living and historical people that are appropriate to use on the type of ancient DNA data that is available from the Catoctin individuals that will be informative about recent shared family histories. Developing these approaches is something that is of great interest to ancient DNA researchers, but for now, any results that can claim to show that the Catoctin individuals who are your close or distant relatives must be carefully scrutinized. While we aren't entirely sure of the exact tools that My True Ancestry used to analyze customer DNA, as they do not make this information public, it is likely that they are using an approach developed to detect identical segments of DNA between two living relatives. While it is possible to apply such tools to compare a DNA obtained from one living and one ancient individual, ironic, they say that they can do one living and one ancient, but somehow they can't do the living to the burial site. So what they're saying is they're not trusting My True Ancestry. All right. So I gave an argument about that with her. So I'm going to continue though. These techniques were not designed to work with ancient DNA, which is very different in quality, ironically, because I would think that's something that passed away and have been mummified for over hundreds of thousands of years, and they're able to test them today, and her line of work is archaeologist, why would she then say now that it's not usable or comparable? I'll continue, which is very different in quality than DNA that can be obtained from living people, and would therefore expect these results to have a very high false positive rate. In other words, they will identify matches in cases where two individuals are not true relatives. What My True Ancestry is most likely picking up on in all of their analysis, meaning their deep dive, sample matches, ancient samples, etc., are broad genetic similarities that are the result of much more ancient shared histories. Ironic. What histories are they sharing? Because this is a whole new story. So in the case of the Catoctin individuals, customers who have similar ancestry, in other words, African or European, may receive a match based on these very broad similarities. But this match would not be informative about their recent family history, nor for determining if they might be a direct descendant of a Catoctin individual. Even if the deep dive matches that My True Ancestry returns accurately identify segments of DNA that a customer and the Catoctin individual have inherited from a common ancestor. In the vast majority of cases, this would not mean that the customer is directly descended from the Catoctin individual. Instead, it will likely mean that they have shared ancestor who lived hundreds of thousands of years before either they or the Catoctin individual lived. Just think about what I'm saying. Just think about what I have brought up. They trust them to be able to tell you about an ancestor that you share DNA with, who lived hundreds or thousands of years ago, either before the Catoctin individual lived. I'm going to continue. But they can't allow it for the Catoctin. So all you have to do when people do stuff like that, you go and you take another test. Now, the fact that they chose the company they wanted to choose to do the testing, I have a problem with that. Because if everybody's doing DNA, and I'll point out again that my true ancestry does not do DNA testing, they only allow the raw DNA, and they match it to the DNA that has already been found for ancient digs. And this is considered an ancient dig. I'll continue. All this aside, we very much want to keep exploring and working with you as we develop our DNA. Our DNA. Ooh, where did I get that from? Our DNA research to see if there is a match with Catoctin individuals and you. Please call me and we can discuss this further. I simply hope we can find a connection with you and Catoctin. I can be reached on my cell at any time. Let me hurry up and get this off. But anyway, that's Elizabeth Comer who emailed me. Okay. Remember, December 2nd, 2002, this email is dated. Okay. December of last year. I'm going to bring you forward and you'll see where they are at this point. All right. The next email is not that one. I think she ended up sending me the map. And then this one in August. I'm going to quickly read this one. This one was August 3rd. I think I read that one from December. Something is missing off of there. That original. Okay, so she did this is August of this year. Where are the rest of my freaking emails? Okay, here we go. August 3rd this year, beginning of 2023. So that was another 27 days, right? 28 days. All right. Elizabeth sends this to me and she says, thank you for contacting the Catoctin Furnace Historical Society Incorporated as we work together to identify and commemorate the incredible contribution and legacy of enslaved ironworkers in America. We want to connect the descendant community of the enslaved industrial workers who created the industrial wealth and power of the white owners in the United States through their skills and expertise. We began this search 9 years ago and found the names of 271 enslaved persons at Catoctin Furnace utilizing oral history and historical documents. This has been a very challenging process using available records. In the interim, we created a collective kinship community in lieu of direct descendants, bringing the lost legacy of iron making and industrial slavery to students and visitors of all ages. Thus far, 2 families with ancestors who worked at Catoctin have been identified using historical and genealogical research. That means oral reports and documentation. She doesn't say DNA. So as of August 3rd, only 2 families, don't know how many people are in those 2 families, came to them with historical evidence or reports and genealogical research. That means building a tree, putting those family members in the tree, verifying locations, censuses, birth certificates, everything. But she hasn't mentioned DNA. So I'm going to continue with this email. All right, now we are on the cusp of new discoveries. I want to bring you up to date with this study of the DNA of the Catoctin individuals, which was published today in the journal Science. That link there leads me to that that white report. When I go into that, it is in size 8 font, and it is long. It's long. It is in high-tech terms, high-tech archaeological, medical terms, everything is real deep in that finding. I did, however, find something. I forgot what it was. All right, so I'm going to continue. We partner with the researchers at Harvard University and 23andMe, who are experts in the fields of ancient DNA and population genetics. As part of this study, they developed an approach that can be used to identify direct genetic connections that link historical and living people. These connections are identified using identical by descent, IBD, segments of DNA, which are segments of DNA that are identical between two people because they were inherited from a shared ancestor. Now, she said that two living people in my original email can't be, that the results can't come from there. And here you see her fast forward almost a year later saying that they tested between two ancestors. Okay, more than likely it's the two that they've already, those two families that were mentioned in the paragraph above. All right, people who have, okay, I'll go back. These connections are identified using identical by descent, IBD, segments of DNA, which are segments of DNA that are identical between two people because they were inherited from a shared ancestor. People who had a common ancestor within the last few generations may share many long IBD segments, while people who share a common ancestor hundreds or thousands of years ago may only share a small number of very short IBD segments. We know that these segments break apart over time as the genome is passed from generation to the next. So we can use the amount and length of these IBD segments to help us understand how long ago people shared a common ancestor. The approach developed as part of this study is the first of its kind for identifying direct connections between historical and living people that has been fully publicly described. That is, all the details about how the method works are reported in the scientific paper. As part of this study, the research team rigorously tested the approach and optimized it to work to identify connections between living and non-living people. They also fully described it so that it can be used by other researchers. It is our hope that going forward, this approach will be used to identify direct genetic connections between the Catoctin individuals and their descendants and other more distant relatives. So I'm telling you now what I talked to her on the phone, that they are aiming towards the direct lineage and not the distances further away, meaning they don't care anything about the fifth generation. They're aiming towards grandchildren, great grands, not cousins or something like that. So I'm going to continue. I verbally spoke with her on the phone about this for over 2 hours, and she was awesome and clear with the information. Very, very clear, very open, very warm about it. So I didn't expect that at the beginning of that first call. Okay, to proceed. Currently, we are not aware of any genetic ancestry companies that are using this approach or another approach that has undergone a similar publicly described rigorous validation process. 23andMe has stated that they are currently considering a way to thoughtfully and ethically return results to those in the 23andMe database who would like to know if they are connected to the Catoctin Furnace individuals. When we get people, they should actually allow people to continue with the testing for a while before they specifically said that they are looking for or starting the database. But because so many people already don't trust the DNA process, because we know that the DNA process is attached to ethnicity. Ethnicity in America is attached to land, and the land is attached to the original Aboriginals who are reclassified. Is it just makes people not want to test and trust the results. I'm going to go ahead and take it. I want to see what's going to happen. I'm going to take it. I'm going to continue with this email. If you share a mitochondrial or Y chromosome haplogroup with one or more of the Catoctin individuals, so it doesn't matter if it is maternal or paternal, this is evidence that you have shared a common ancestor on your maternal or paternal lineage at some point in time. However, we caution that this shared common ancestor may have lived hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of years before the Catoctin individual. Unbelievable. This is therefore not conclusive evidence that you are a direct descendant or close relative of one of the Catoctin individuals. Make it make sense. I'm going to read it again. If you share a mitochondrial or Y chromosome haplogroup with one or more of the Catoctin individuals, this is evidence that you have shared common ancestor on your maternal or paternal lineage at some point in time. However, we caution that this shared common ancestor may have lived hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of years before the Catoctin individuals. This is therefore not conclusive evidence that you are a direct descendant or close relative of one of the Catoctin individuals. Now, mind you, I already told her that I'm supposedly ancestor to 21 of them. I already showed you at the beginning of this live via the My True Ancestry results that I have 21 Catoctin Iron Furnace, Maryland laborers as ancestors. I'll continue. Additionally, because the results that the company My True Ancestry is reporting are based on analysis that are not publicly described, we have no way to verify their accuracy. Several of the Catoctin individuals included in My True Ancestry reports are ones that our research partners determined did not have enough ancient DNA data to be suitable for this type of IBD analysis. Now, think about what I just read. Remember, she said that the My True Ancestry results go too far back, tens of thousands of years ago. Then they contradict themselves and then says, My True Ancestry reports are the ones that they've determined is not suitable because they don't go back far enough. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It's just contradictory. And so when my first discussion in December, I said to her, I said, that's very discouraging. How can you make a determination that because someone is using my true ancestry and you verbally say that they are not the descendants of these remains? Well, because my true ancestry, we don't even know if we don't know anything about their testing. This is what was said to me. I said, but that doesn't mean that you discourage someone from continuing on with trying to find out if they are a descendant of one of the laborers. I told her, I said, I'm lucky that I'm not the type of person that give up easily. And you'll see later on in my other emails. Okay. Continuing on, it says, if the approach that my true ancestry is using is not optimized to work on this type of ancient DNA data. Now, they already said that is not ancient, and that their work is too far behind to determine something from 1824. Okay. It may have a very high false positive rate, meaning that it identifies connections in cases where none exist. All right. This type of false positive result may instead be evidence of much more distant shared ancestry, such as that observed between unrelated people who have African ancestry. I also was turned off when she said that they were African. But they're trying to say that they're specifically are African because the only an African could do the iron work that was performed on that at that furnace. One, remember, she keeps calling them laborers and not enslaved. But then she said they were specifically brought over here from Africa, from tribes that were involved in iron works and the best at iron works. So don't let anybody discourage you. I don't let anybody discourage me. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I really, really don't. And I encourage other people not to as well. I'm gonna continue this email, and I had to go through these emails so you have an idea of what is going on in Maryland and the states that I mentioned, the surnames, and you have an idea of that there are burial sites all around this nation. They're not just of Africans or American Indians. We're all over this United States, buried. Relatives don't know where they are at. Did never come home. Had no idea what happened to them. The atrocities. All right. We very much want to keep exploring and working with you as we develop our DNA research to see if there is a match between Catoctin individuals and you. Please let me know your thoughts and how we can assist in your search for ancestors at Catoctin and beyond. I simply hope we can work together to define the exact connection between you and Catoctin. She don't know I did that in less than an hour. I searched and I searched, even though you could type in Patterson, I searched and I searched because after you pull up names, the names have to connect to the state. And within that location, they have to connect with other names. And when you pull up those censuses and you see that these names are connected, yeah, I ended up, it wasn't like, okay, I found one or two documents. I had to actually go through document and person and accept different hints and go in and out. I had to do that. It just didn't lay down, but I found it fairly quickly. Don't give up. This is just the work that genealogy has, and it's a lot of fun, and there's times that I want to cry. I actually was very sad and disappointed what happened to the persons at the Catoctin And then to find out there is another burial site in Delaware that I'm supposedly attached to as well. All right. I sincerely hope we can work together to define the exact connection between you and Catoctin. I can be reached on my cell. Here's a website. Please visit it. And we've uploaded the article so that you can see it. That was August 3rd. August 5th, she writes me another one. You ready? I'm going to try to read this one without stopping and without commenting. All right, so you can see there, it says Catoctin Furnace DNA study, updated email with corrected link. Okay, I think what happened was it was a broken link in the email that I just read. That's exactly what happened. All right, so I'm going to click this email. Okay, same email, but it's just 2 days later, someone contacted her and told her that the link was broken. All right, so this is how the report looks, the white report. I'm just waiting for you to join me. And let me go back. There you go. That's how it looks. The genetic legacy of African Americans from Catoctin Furnace. Remember, they were not called African Americans. That term did not happen until Jesse Jackson legislated for it. He had already talked to the people he needed to talk to in order to come on national TV to get us to accept it. I remember being in 8th grade when they actually pushed it. I remember when it went from colored, Black American, and then African American. And I was still in grammar school. All right, so this is how it looks. This is how the report looks. It is long. I already told you it's 8 fonts. There's a timeline. There's the cemetery again. More research on it. How they tie in the different families, the ancestry that's involved. Here you'll see is the sub-Saharan African. And we already know that when we do a test, sub-Saharan is coming up. And the reason why it's coming up is because it is a deep dive bloodline that is taking us back to, if you're an Israelite blood. Simple as that. And that bloodline is carrying on. All right. Now, here we go. She didn't even mention the indigenous American, and we already know they've been reclassified. So here's the ancestry composition: sub-Saharan African, West Asian, and North African. That means that that's Arab and Moor and Mongolian. Something is going on with the West African. I don't know. I think it was Congo. I don't know about Ghana. So the report has to be read deeper than that, but there's an email that describes who they are. North African, Europeans were there. Some of the people were mixed. I think it was like 3 admixed with European, East Asian, and indigenous American, Melanesian, which is it's like that's in my tree as well. Australian. That's where the Australian is coming from in my DNA. And with that line of the Maga that I originally showed you. The Central and South Asian. This is the makeup of the people that they said are African American in this graveyard. None of the reports say anything about Asian. None of it. None of the emails. Nothing. They keep referring to African American. So that means that the African American makeup is sub-Saharan, West Asian, and North African, East Asian, and indigenous American blood, Central and South Asian, and Malaysian. and then throw in your European. Don't let these people tell you who you are when you are out there, especially on TikTok. I'm so happy to see those youngins on there kicking butt and standing their ground and don't care what anybody is saying. I am glad about it. They can remember dates and times. They can remember locations. They can remember all of that. So I am proud of them over there doing that thing. They are the ones that are set up to do the debates, and perhaps those debates are going to make people think, make the people that they are debating against think, make the viewers think, and everybody has their what they are responsible for doing with all of this knowledge of our ancestors. I'm just a firm believer of that. Everybody was blessed to do their part in it, and it's for our generation. So every generation had a record keeper, and it so happened to be our generation now. All right, so this is how the Wright report look. It is 15 pages. I am going to leave there. I have to get back to this email. That is a duplicate email. Only thing about it, the link worked. All right. This is a short one, dated August 8th. And mind you, this is this month. So 3 or 4 of them were this month's emails. Elizabeth Coleman writes me and says, this recent paper by Jenny Bustrow delves into the role of enslaved Africans. Remember, we just left out of a Wright report, and the Wright report says what? Asian, indigenous, European. This is not making sense. Okay, I'm going to read again. This recent paper by Jenny Bustrow delves into the role of enslaved Africans in iron making and manufacturing technology of the Africans brought to the New World. Black metallurgists and the making of the Industrial Revolution history and technology. So she gave me a link here, and then she said, but I found it somewhere else. I'm going to click in. I'm not going to stay here long. It is a lot of reading, but this actually delves into the how the workers, first about where they came from. A lot of them came from Jamaica, as you can see here in this report. No, wrong one. Okay. They came from Jamaica. The very first paragraph, they mentioned Jamaica. That is in my tree for the McGaw family in Barbados, of the Pattersons, Johnsons, and Martins, and the Tuscaroras. Here you see Jamaican right there, where I have that circle going. I don't know why it's so slow, but I'm watching. So maybe it'll start circling. Right here. All right, so it mentions the different tribes or the different islands of quote unquote Africans, and the different metals that they worked with, the different ironwork, their artistry, and how that developed the Industrial Revolution of the Americans. This is some of the art that the iron makers made in Ghana. And some of the remains are stated to be from Ghana. All right. So this is how long the report is. It goes and it goes, and it keeps talking about the contributions that the ironwork made to society, and the specific work of the Igbo tribe, and As we already know, they talk about just Africans. Doesn't make sense to me, but it does, even though they've already described the makeup of the ethnicities of the remains. All right, here's another one. Here's a link to a video that is part of the Catoctin Furnace. This was August 9th. August 9th. I'm not going to go into that one because it's just a YouTube video. And about Sudan, which would be Northern Africa.
The kingdom of Kush, originating in present-day Sudan, is one of the great ancient states of Africa.
Ancient iron work.
For over 1,000 years, Kush ruled vast territory.
So out of all of the study for the remains, they're stating that is leading back to, quote unquote, because you know people get upset when you say something about Africa, quote unquote, Africa. All right? Even though they keep saying they indigenous and all the other ethnicities. All right, so the next email. Let me see how many more. 1, 2, 3. All right, so just 3 more. I'm going to finish up. This one is again from Elizabeth Comer. It's dated August 16th. It says, this is an update now. Dear Catoctin Furnace descendant community member, as you are aware, we have been diligently working on our identical by descent, remember the IBD analysis, and comparing the results, all anonymous at this point, which with those reported by My True Ancestry. Whoa. My True Ancestry has reported to them. Okay, I didn't know that. Well, unfortunately, while we are confident that the 23andMe method is accurate based on the analysis reported in a recent paper published in Science, there does not appear to be any relation to the rates of the deep dive relationships picked up by My True Ancestry. Thus, the Catoctin Furnace Cemetery individuals who have high rates of matching to people in the 23andMe database and who we think really are people with more close relatives. They think now, okay, so are not the same ones as high rates of matching for My True Ancestry. Unfortunately, what that means is that it is likely that the great majority of deep dive matches reported by My True Ancestry are not truly close relatives. I am very sorry to relay this to you, as I know that there is an enormous desire to have accurate answers and connections. Now, I'm going to tell you how people do things like this. I want you to think about it. Oh, I'm back in the email. I'm sorry. I want you to think about it. What I just read to you. Here is a person who has been contacted by individuals who says, hey, I have a My True Ancestry match, and I've noticed that you're doing research to find the descendants. They're not showing her tests. They're not telling them, she's barely knowing their names, okay? And she's telling them where the test is from, which she doesn't even mention the fact that it's just raw DNA uploaded, not even the sample. But she makes the argument that, hey, you can't be. And I've already mentioned this to her, that she can't just say that to people because she don't know the people and she don't have the test. There is no test done for her to make a verbal statement to anyone and say, well, you know what? You can't be a close relative. I'm telling you how a person can detour you if you're not on point, if you're not a researcher, if you're not a diligent person of research and about your business. No one should be able to easily discourage you like that. And it's simple. Take the 23andMe test, even though I'm skeptical about what could possibly take place with a company that they've already brought on, because she stated that they brought them on, they partnered with them to do the testing of the live people. I've already received a my heritage update where I was removed from, well, increased from, I think 12 or 18% Nigerian to now 54 to 56%. One point, my indigenous Amerindian was taken away, and then I was thrown, and my European was taken away, almost 5%, and was given to Nigerian DNA. I said, now, since when that you can't determine the difference between European DNA that you originally stated that it was, and then you make a decision to say, that's not European DNA, that's actually African DNA. Now make it make sense. I've seen my Ancestry just did this. Ancestry did it, and now my heritage has caught up with them, and my heritage actually, someone in the comments pointed out about the my heritage testing, that is just doesn't have enough testing, meaning it's just kind of bland. It does the DNA matches, then it will tell you, it doesn't go into a lot of ancestry. It doesn't. It just give you your matches, and then it will say what continent you're from, but it doesn't really do a lot. So with my heritage, I liked it for a whole nother reason. But I'm kind of disappointed at them at this point when they just did their update on the 28th. It was trash. All right, it was trash. All right, so I'm gonna finish. Unfortunately, while we are confident that the 23andMe method is accurate based on the analysis reported in the recent paper published in Science, there does not appear to be any relation to the rates of the deep dive relationship picked up by My True Ancestry. Anyway, thus the Catoctin Furnace Cemetery individual who have high rates of matching to people in 23rd database. They are not the same ones as the high rates of matching. So unfortunately, what that means is that it is likely that the great majority of deep dive matches reported by My True Ancestry are not truly close relatives. I am very sorry. I am very sorry to relay this to you, okay? Because I know that there is an enormous desire to have accurate answers and connections. Some of you to whom I have spoken have opened that any connection is meaningful. I told you people are saying something to it. I'm going to read that again. Some of you to whom I have spoken have opened that any connection is meaningful, no matter the distance into deep time or as collateral relationship to Catoctin. However, I am saddened to disappoint, and I know you will be as well. What this tells me is that we must keep working to help you understand how your family relates to Catoctin using what we believe are accurate and reliable methodologies. But this will take some time to accomplish. It will take time, even though we find 40,000 people. It's going to take time for us to think that deep dive for 10,000 years ago can't truly match the people today, because it's too far. It just, and then, okay. All right. Oh, she mentioned some names down there. I told you. I didn't see this one. I didn't read this email all the way, but let me finish it. As some of you are aware, more than 9 years ago, the Robert Patterson Descendant Working Group began researching the legacy of Mr. Patterson. All right, so it is Patterson. All right. She told me on the phone, but I didn't read this email thoroughly. A free African American working at Catoctin Furnace. They developed a Facebook page, Catoctin Furnace, Maryland enslaved ironworker descendants, and many of you are part of that and have joined the Facebook group they began. It may be confusing, but that group was formed to solely focus on Robert Patterson, his ancestors, and his descendants. We do not know if any Pattersons are in the cemetery. She's lying because she's the one who told me the name. But this is one of the questions we are pursuing. She told me that Patterson name before August 16th. She did. This is my first time reading this email. She told me it was Patterson, Johnson, and Martin, and two other names. And here in this email, she says, we do not know if any Pattersons are in the cemetery. That's not what she told me. Okay, so the overwhelming interest and support we have received from you has made it clear that I'm confused. Let me read this again. Okay, so if Robert Patterson, if whoever started this Facebook page, did they or didn't they take the 23andMe test? Because that's all that's needed, right? Did they or didn't they take the test? We do not know if Pattersons are in the cemetery, but this is one of the questions we are pursuing. The overwhelming interest and support we have received from you has made it clear that we must do more. I just wrote and submitted a grant request to fund a person to help the project and thus helping you. Here is what I requested. CFHS, which is the Catoctin Furnace Historical Society, is requesting a $30,000 grant to hire a descendant communicator to work part-time, 20 hours per week for a year. The anticipated salary will be $30 per hour. This descendant communicator would be responsible for maintaining the existing database of 205 plus people and adding to it. This position would review all the existing DNA and descendant data compiled during the past 14 months since the initial release, respond directly and rapidly to each new inquiry, send regular emails, maintain correspondence with the descendant group, and be the point person for this initiative. This includes speaking in person with each individual in order to understand and respond to their specific DNA and genealogical questions. Additionally, excuse me, I don't know why this won't let me click. This be getting on my nerve. All right, this regular emails and be the point person for the initiative. Okay, this position will review all existing DNA and descendant data compiled during the past 14 months since the initial release. Respond to everyone. This includes speaking in person with each person in order to understand and respond to their specific DNA and genealogical questions. Additionally, the descendant communicator will conduct additional research on African Americans buried in the cemetery and organize public programming for the local community and descendants, including regular meetings and updates with AARCH Fredericks County's preeminent African American organization. In many instances, this would include multiple follow-up conversations and to ascertain what the descendant community, both direct and collateral, desires from this study. What do you mean? Desire from the study? You already said that there's reparations for anyone that's related. What do you mean what they want from the study? want to be, be quiet. This individual will be responsible. Okay, this will be responsible for ensuring that voices are both heard and responded to in a timely and sensitive manner. Additionally, utilizing these data, the descendant communicator will produce a white paper outlining the successes and failures of the outreach so that other sites and groups can utilize this information in the future. Finally, this individual will assist in the convening of scholars virtually or at a professional conference, such as the Small Museums Association or similar venue, to help interpret and disseminate these data. The descendant communicator would regularly meet with Elizabeth Comer and be under her direct supervision. This position could be remote through a visit to, although a visit to Catoctin Furnace at the beginning of the project year would be helpful. Again, we are working as hard as we can for you and your ancestors. We are all volunteers. So if you do not receive a reply immediately, please know we will get back to you as soon as possible. And please do not hesitate to call or email with your thoughts, recommendations, or suggestions. If you know anyone who might be interested in the position, please let me know about it. As soon as I know if the grant proposal was successful, I will send out a formal position description. Thank you very much. And she signs it. We have two more. And I have to let you just get you up to par. This one I have not opened. This one is pointing out about a video describing who in South Africa and elsewhere in Swahili did ironworks, even though they are, I don't know, it says 20,000. Let me read it. The Ngwenya mine is located near the northwestern border of Eswatini's Swahili land in South Africa. This mine is considered to be the world's oldest. The hammerite ore deposit was used in the Middle Stone Age to extract red ochre, while in later times the deposit was mined for iron smelting and iron ore export. Several Stone Age artifacts were found in the mine during archaeological works in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Their age was established with radiocarbon dating as older than 20,000 years. Later, radiocarbon dating yielded the age of the oldest mining activities as 41,000 to 43,000 years ago. This would make Ngwenya the oldest known mine in the world. So I'm not going to click that YouTube video, but it will be a video showing the mines over there. This is the last one that I have received for Tuesday, August 29th from Elizabeth. And it reads, as many of you are aware, CFHS has several research projects underway in addition to the DNA project. One of these, Recovering Identity, is a historical and architectural survey of the northern Frederick County, Maryland African American structures and landscapes. It's funny because there was no African Americans alive in the 1800s because the term wasn't used until after the reclassification. And we're talking about the 1980. So I'm confused again. Anyway, Maryland African American structures and landscapes. Attached is the context report that we wrote to record the African American history of the area. We are working on the individual structure reports, which will be forthcoming. I hope this is helpful in your family research. She's very kind, though. When you talk to her on the phone, She's very open. She's I don't know where is that, but let me see. It's not letting me open it. Okay, there we go. It's a PDF. I want to review it. I probably can't pull it up because it ends up being a PDF. Oh, wow. It's 163 pages, and it reads African American History of the Monocacy Catoctin region of Northern Frederick County, Maryland. I'm the type of person, I like printing stuff. I like stuff in my hand. I'm not that e-reader person swiping those doggone to the side. I don't like that. I don't know how the people find that convenient. I personally do not. Okay, so it points out being, they call the Indians Native Americans as well in this report. They point out everything. There's pictures, documents, everything. So I'll have to go over that at a later time. And this is old and that's old. So that's how those emails went. So you have an idea of what the update is. I actually, again, I did a few, I think it was videos or posts on TikTok regarding the Catoctin Iron Furnace. It actually has a bust model of the Catoctin historical, well, of one of these, the ladies that it actually is supposed to be a 3D bust model of what the remains of the, I think the adult female that had the baby buried on top of her. Miss Elizabeth Comer told me this herself, that the Black woman had an admixed biracial baby, and that baby was, and it was clearly supposed to be clearly biracial DNA buried on top of her. All right, you have an idea about the Catoctin Furnace, what it is that they did. They burned metal every day. Under extremely hot, under extremely hot temperatures. Who knows how long they were working, the hours, the length of time, the duration of the workday. But there is reports of the remains having devastating, it's described like this, devastating, heinous bone malfunctions and deformities based on the work that was performed. And a lot of the people, a lot of the remains, they didn't make it over a certain age. And this is the four brothers of the Catoctin that ran the Catoctin Furnace. One of them was the mayor, the governor of Maryland. I'm trying to pull it up. Sorry about that. Thank you for staying with me this long. But usually it will show the brothers' names. And here it is here. I'm gonna go Wikipedia. So any of you that don't find it to be a reliable source, I'm going to utilize it as my source. The Catoctin Furnace, also known as the Catoctin Iron Furnace, is an historic iron forge located on Route 15 between Frederick and Thurmont in Catoctin Furnace, Maryland. Since it was closed in 1903, no forge has been at the site. 1903. 1903. All the way through slavery through 1903. Catoctin Furnace was constructed in 1774 by four brothers, Thomas, Baker, Roger, and James Johnson, to produce pig iron from locally mined hematite. In blast by 1776, the furnace provided ammunition, cannonballs for the American Revolutionary War. Some sources state that it also provided the cannon. They also state that iron from this furnace was much later used to make plates for the USS Monitor. However, that is considered unlikely by researchers. Slaves operated the furnace during this time. But I keep being described, or they keep being described as skilled workers who came to specifically work, not slave. The term slave is not used when communicating that. All right. Slaves operated the furnace during this time. In 2023, a research project identified 41,799 descendants of these slaves and is considering to notify them. The Johnson brothers owned the furnaces at the site at first collectively and after 1793 singly until 1811. So I'm wondering if they're going to mention that one of them was the governor because he lost his election after a while. Ultimately, 3 furnaces were built at the site, each named for the site. The first Catoctin furnace was rebuilt a short distance away in 1787. The second, named Isabella, was built in the 1850s by Jacob Kunkel. It still stands within Cunningham Falls State Park. The first 2 furnaces burned charcoal. The third, which opened in 1873, burned coke. The entire complex closed in 1903. Today, the furnaces' remains are located in Cunningham Falls State Park. A walking tour handout is available in the park's visitor center. In 1973, the Catoctin Furnace Historical Society was formed by Eugene and several other people. And just what I stated, they did not mention that one of them was the governor, but they don't have to do that. I'm going to go in. Which Catoctin, and this is how you do the research, is constantly going in doing exactly what I'm doing. Which Catoctin is constantly, whatever idea you come up with, that's what you do to get your research going. Which Catoctin furnace, which Catoctin, which brother was, which Johnson brother was the governor? Okay, so I don't think it's Pennsylvania. All right, here we go. Looks like Thomas. They have it on that page, but I am going to go into the Maryland State Archives. They don't say much. I didn't expect them to, but I've already have articles where I know that he was actually thrown out of office for some reason. Forget. Okay, so it's saying in 1733, the settlers, Henry Johnson, came to Prince George's County. This is not giving anything. That's more. Baker Johnson. Baker. That's funny that Wikipedia ain't got nothing to say about him, and I could have sworn that I did get it from them. I just don't want to go. Well, they tried to put it there. I already seen the articles about his election. That's crazy. Okay, folks, I don't see where. Well, let's see. It says four brothers, James Baker, Roger, and Thomas Johnson, had the farsightedness to see the valleys. Listen to the wordings. Had the farsightedness to see the valley's industrial potential on the eve of the American Revolution. They had farsightedness, making it seem like their idea was phenomenal. And the idea was to make cannonballs and cannons for a war. I'll continue. This group of enterprising men, listen to the terminology, listen to the adjectives. This group of enterprising men bought land at the foot of the Catoctin Ridge, and there began construction of an iron furnace. The Johnson furnace was in blast by 1776 and turning out a variety of useful tools and household items, including the popular tin plate or the Catoctin stove. Okay, that's what else I forgot to show you, the stove. Toward the end of the Revolutionary War, it also produced ammunition for the Continental Army, including shells fired during the siege of Yorktown. Following independence, Thomas Johnson went to become Maryland's first governor, and they don't say the year. In 1803, his brother Baker Johnson became the sole owner of Catoctin Furnace. That's 1803. Another 21 years later, you have a whole burial site of people of all ages, not aged out, but people of all ages. What happened to all of those people? Shortly thereafter, he built a stately Georgian mansion called Arbon, still standing proudly, listen to the adjectives, standing proudly just west of Route 15 in the southern end of the village. Well, whether they show this or not, I got the article on my TikTok where it states his election and what happened and how he lost. I believe how he lost his next election. He wasn't reelected. But the remains were found on their property. The Catoctin Furnace stove, I'm going to show you this, a potbelly stove. This is how I keep getting my information, and this is how I build my tree. I just, whatever I think about and whatever I see, I type it in and, excuse me, I type it in, and then I just start looking and researching. But these are the 5 parts to it here. Can you see it? I don't know. I'm gonna come out. Oh, dang. I messed that one all the way up. All right. I need to get that stove up and then come back out. All right, as you can see, did I click over? I did not. I don't know what in the world. All right, sorry about that. The page actually clicked off. And what you see is the Catoctin stove. This is how the entire, well, the entire furnace. This is how the furnace looks, and it's massive. It looks like just a small image when we look at it from the standpoint of our devices. Excuse me. But I can guarantee you that that brick wall, that stone wall there, was huge. Because if we look at the post of the building, we wouldn't be our heads, excuse me, our heads would not be touching the height of where those posts are. We would probably be halfway to it, or at least 3/4. So when you think about this furnace, and you go in and near it, imagine the heat and the height of it, and it blazing with fire and chemicals burning. So I'm going to give you side views of it. That's one of the iron stoves. I think that's it. I had a better picture. All right, so this is the update. I wasn't able to give the update of each email, even though when I got each email, I wanted to do so. But I try to think of a way of presenting it. And so, of course, my man screenshot the email and then put it up and put the music behind it. But when I think about it, I'm like, no, it needs a narrative, especially for anybody that's coming in and not understanding what the story is actually about, what the email is actually about, even if they just read it. Okay, so what does that got to do with you? Why are you telling me about this? Well, here the Catoctin Furnace history is that they imported Indians, Asians, Malaysians, slaves, Australians, and Africans, free or enslaved, and more than likely indentured, to work the furnace. That is burning iron and turning the iron into products, usable products. The reason why I presented the story is because I found the results, or the deep dive results from Ancestry, my true ancestry. That's where I began the research. And the reason why I did so is because of the genetic distance that I was told I had. So to bring you forward, you know that I've been communicating with the archaeologists regarding this project. I do now know that not ancestry, but 23andMe are involved in determining who is actually related to these remains of these ancestors. The next thing for me to do is the test. Is for me to take the test. Okay, let me test something. It's for me to take the test. All right, I'm not sure if everyone is still there or not, because I have it blinked off a couple of times. Can you hear me? All right, I don't know. Hold on. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Yep. Okay, so to continue, my next thing is to take the 23andMe DNA genetic test. I will do that this week. I will order it after this live. But now the second discussion is the Avery burial. This is my first time seeing this. This is newly added. The site that I am on is My True Ancestry. So I am trying to get to the Avery results that they are here. All right, here. So it's stating in 1680 AD, I have colonial Delaware. That means pre-colonial Delaware. Indian Territory. Settlers coming aboard 1680. 1619, first Africans brought on aboard. 1680 AD, colonial Delaware slave trade victim Avery Rest, meaning R-E-S-T. The different boxes there on the timeline lets me know that that means that there is more than one ancestor that they're linking me to. And if you look at the genetic distance, that also lets you know that they're different people. I don't know what gender. As you can see, the Catoctin had mentioned the genders, at least one. At one point, there were two, and then it said teenager, but I don't see that anymore on there. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 colonial Delaware slave trade victim. Is his name Avery Rest? All right, so this is what I do next. This is how you research. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to copy and paste, which I can't. It's not letting me copy and paste. Never knew that about My True Ancestry. That's okay because I can type. All right, so I'm going to go into another tab. I'm going to type in 16. I'm going to take you on this with me. I'm going to go and type in 1680 AD. What was that? Colonial Delaware. What was that name again? Slave trade victim Avery Rest. Okay. All right, so you've caught up with me. The very first option that I have, it says Black colonist skeletons at Avery's Rest. I don't know if Avery Rest is a location or the person's name, but by the reads of it, it appears to be a location. But it says Black colonist, even though at My True Ancestry, they said slave. All right. So I'm going to go in the first one. I'm going to see what they have. It takes a lot of work. You go in, you go out. I skim and I see if it's a reputable resource, reputable company. I look to see if it's satire, the date published, who's publishing it. And as you can see, they're doing a dig for the location. This looks like the date is February 3rd, 2021. This is, I'm going to go ahead and read because nearly the same thing happened when finding the Catoctin burial site. All right, so coastal history is complicated. It says written records are often contradictory or incomplete. Archaeological discoveries sometimes challenge long-held beliefs, and 21st century people have difficulty understanding the mindset of people who lived hundreds of years ago. Nowhere are these difficulties more apparent than in the lives of colonial neighbors who lived on the banks of Rehoboth Bay in the 17th century. John Johnson, if we were to look at that name, John Johnson, whose father, and this is Delaware, whose father was an early settler of the Virginia colony, was born around 1640 and moved to Somerset County on Maryland's eastern shore in 1665. Sure, a lot of remains that people didn't know they had in Maryland. Sure, a lot. But okay. Little more than a decade later, John moved to southern Delaware, where he acquired a substantial tract of 400 acres on Rehoboth Bay. Now, I don't know if any of you have been reading through any of the genealogy records or the documents, like, for instance, at the Library of Congress or Ancestry, or whoever have any records. You'll see in wills, because I've read a lot of wills connected in my tree, where they were given like 400 acres of land when they first came over here. Thousands of acres of land for just coming over settling. And then if they fought and if they were able to get the indigenous to sympathize with them, they got more money based on that. Then if they were able to convince them to convert or assimilate, they got more money. If they were able to get them to be removed or sign treaties, they got more land and resources. So the land that they took from the indigenous were actually given to the surveyors or the U.S. agents to begin a process of conditioning the indigenous and then ultimately taking the land, right? I'm gonna continue with this one. It didn't have what I thought it would have in it, but I'm gonna continue. It says for the next 30 years, John Johnson was a member of growing colonial community of Southern Delaware, and Sussex County court records left a trail of some of his activities. On several occasions, Johnson appeared in court to testify in several cases concerning land ownership. When Johnson's wife died upon suspicious circumstances, Johnson was arrested. But after a short investigation, the court declared that there was no sign of murder. Don't know why they jumped to that, but anywho, despite this unsettling incident, Johnson remained a respected member of the coastal community. But as he grew older, he was unable to care for himself. What are you talking about? All right, in 1704, the Sussex County Court ordered that 50 shillings of public money be spent for keeping and maintaining of John Johnson. The oldest colonist died sometimes after 1707. His burial site is unknown. The written record of John Johnson contrasts sharply with the archaeological remains of 3 skeletons recently found at Avery's Rest, a 17th century farm on the banks of Rehoboth Bay. We know what's in Virginia and Delaware. We already know what's going on by North Carolina. We already know what's going on and who there. We finna see who these 3 remains are, because they remember they keep saying slave. And we know that the Mary Indian during war times were enslaved. So in the 1670s, John Avery, like Johnson, a former Maryland colonist, settled on a tract of 350 acres of land on the north shore of Rehoboth, where he named his new home Avery's Rest, R-E-S-T. After Avery passed away in 1682, the colonists' house was eventually abandoned and leveled under until little remained above ground. Several years ago, archaeologists digging at Avery's rest uncovered graves with 11 skeletons that were buried sometime between 1665 and 1695. DNA analysis revealed that the 8 skeletons were of European descent, and two adults and one child, were of African heritage. It is assumed that the 3 people of African heritage were slaves of the Avery family. The wear on the bones of all the adults, that's another story about the wear of the bones. That's what they've stated about the bones of the Catoctin workers. I'm going to read that. The wear on the bones of all of the adults in both groups indicate that they engaged in hard labor. Imagine being worked like that till your bones were overworked. And that everyone at Avery's Rest shared the hard work of maintaining a tobacco plantation on the mid-Atlantic frontier. So it was all for tobacco. So apparently tobacco work is just as bad on the body. I'm going to continue. Lacking gravestones and documentary evidence, the archaeologists could not assign a name to any of the particular skeletons, but the European skeletons were most likely members of the Avery family. DNA analysis of the bones of the 2 men and the old child in the African group revealed the 2 adults were of West African heritage, and the children was from East, and the child was from East Africa. The location of John Johnson's farm on Rehoboth Bay is not known, but in the sparsely settled Sussex County, it is likely that Johnson came into contact with Avery and his slaves. There is abundant archaeological evidence about Avery's Rest and the African Americans who were held in bondage there, but there is little documentary evidence about these 3 people. On the other hand, there is ample documentary evidence about John Johnson, but zero archaeological evidence of him. It would be easy to assume that Johnson was right, but he was not. He is identified in the court records as John Johnson, free Negro. Wow. I didn't expect that about this story. I'm telling you, I didn't. Okay. I thought they said he was okay. All right. So I think I counted 7. How about 5 or 6 that I'm supposedly related to on True Ancestry? I don't know about any reports of this one, no DNA findings or matching to today's ancestors. I don't know if this, what's going on with this one, but I definitely know that there are reparations for the Catoctin, and more than likely because of the disturbed grave sites having been buried on the work property and not given back to family members. That's probably why the state or the government believes that they owe reparations, and that a governor held those workers. So that's what I'm coming up. All right. Johnson was a free Negro. In colonial Delaware, Black and white, free and slave lived side by side. Coastal history is complicated. And that is the principal source is Free African Americans of North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina from the colonial period to about 1820. It is a 5th edition, volume 2 of Baltimore 2005, Genealogical Publishing Company, 2005. Did not expect that the colonists, that's why this initial article said Black colonists. And then the next article says 8 white and 3 black. All right. So I wanted, okay, here's a study. Let's go to the study. Down here, you'll see the DNA study of remains at Delaware site. Finds kinship among European settlers and African slaves. The kinship findings are significant because they add another layer to the story of what life was like on the colonial front. Same verbiage. There you have, and I am utilizing the University of Connecticut. Looks like a blog. This is a map of the East Coast and the 13 colonies. And it's funny where Canada is. You see Louisiana above Arkansas, close to Illinois. Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. I need to get to it, don't I? All right. So let's see what this study says, and then I will close out on this. Early colonial settlers likely survived the harsh frontier conditions of 17th century Delaware because they banded as family units to work alongside enslaved African descendants and European indentured servants, according to a new study published this summer in Current Biology. Anthropological Genesis Waquel E. Flesk, who was a Natural Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow in University of Connecticut's Anthropology Department the last 2 years, authored the study along with colleagues from the Smithsonian Institution, Archaeological Society of Delaware, University of Tennessee, and University of Pennsylvania, who have been studying the Avery's Rest archaeological site near Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, for decades. Avery's Rest, a former tobacco farm owned by John Avery and his family from roughly 1675 to 1725, were discovered in 1976, most recently. That means land has been abandoned. And where are the descendants to claim the land? That's why when people on TikTok be telling you, you better look into your people's land. Some of the land is abandoned. Some of it is, all right. Let's see. A former tobacco farmer owned by John Avery and his family from roughly 1675 were discovered in 1976, added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, and excavated in the early 2000s. Human remains were found in 2013. That is 7 men, 2 women, and 2 children. DNA analysis of those remains shows most were of European descent, although 3 were of African descent, 2 men and a child, which was, where's the woman? First, I'm confused. 7 men, 2 women, 2 children. The 3 Africans were 2 men and a child, which was a significant finding, Flex says, because they are among the earliest discovered in Delaware. Avery's rest is notable because the European individuals and African individuals were buried in the same burial ground, separated by only 15 to 20 feet, Flesk says. This is different than in later antebellum 18th century cemeteries where African descendant persons were often buried in separate locations. Based on this mortuary archaeological, archaeology, we know that folks were likely integrating in different ways than in later periods, likely influenced by the frontier locale. Flesk explains that her DNA analysis of the remains was done in two phases, with the first looking at the mitochondrial DNA, the maternal lineage, and published in 2019. It found the European individuals were related, but African individuals were not. For this paper that was just published, we looked at the full 23 chromosomes, which includes the y-DNA of paternal history, she says. We found there is biological relatedness between one of the adult African males and a child. They are father and son. This is significant because this is the earliest identification of biological kinship between individuals of African descent in the North American colonial context. So they were colonists in the 1600s. All right, among the European descendant remains, Flesk identified a grandmother, a mother, and an infant son, saying this too is important because it proves that, excuse me, that families were involved in working the land, despite children and women oftentimes being left out of archival records. People think settlements. Let me take some water. Give me a second. All right, it says people think settlements comprised white European men who worked the land, died there, and were buried. But what Avery Rest shows is kinship as the structuring principle that carries the use of this land through multiple generations, she says. The kinship findings are significant because they add another layer to the story of what life was like on the colonial frontier. DNA analysis further adds to that story with the determination the 8 individuals of European descent were from Northwest Europe, which aligns with archival records that show most people who immigrated to Delaware during that time were from England, Flesk says. The genetic roots of the 3 African descendant individuals were harder to pin down, she adds. One has definite connections to West Africa, while the father and son have mixed ancestral backgrounds from West and Central Africa. This discovery is important in understanding the early origins of transatlantic slave trade. And we know that although a lot of American Indians during the Indian Wars were going out as prisoner of wars, the transatlantic slave trade did involve going in that triangle to different countries, getting gold, spices, and as we know it, humans, and bringing them coast to coast, island to island, continent to continent. All right. During this period, when there are likely fewer than 500 persons of African descent in the area, so that means she just pointed out what I had been saying. So this is past 1619. Remember, the first African enslaved were brought over 1619, quote unquote. Only 20 to 30. By what time is this? What year is this? 18. By the 17th century, but I don't see 1675 through 1725. By this time, there are over 500 Africans to land in that area, not millions like they keep saying. As you can see in this article here, this is with the Today University of Connecticut. All right, so I'm going to continue. She says there's no direct port in this locale. So these men would have had to be forcibly brought into Maryland or the port of New York and then transported via land. And when you look at Delaware on the map, it appears that it's very difficult to even boat up in that location. I look at Virginia the same way. And what is that? North Carolina, because the land or the islands, they go in and out, or erosion or whatever has happened to the land. And it looks like it appears to be very difficult for a boat, and the size of any boats that they said brought people over would make it very difficult for them to port. And as you can see in this particular writing, that she's reporting that there was only 500 people, and that's like that because the ports are difficult to even navigate. She said that they were forcibly brought into Maryland or the port of New York and then transported via land. So they came in some other place, which was probably Virginia. Who knows? Flesk also speculates that since John Avery was a pioneer with ties to Barbados, here we go with Barbados and the Caribbean again, and the Johnsons. Flesk also speculates that since John Avery was a mariner with ties to Barbados, the enslaved individuals could have been brought from the Caribbean. Without direct archival evidence, though, there's no way to know their backstory or even that they are definitely the two adult enslaved males listed among Avery's property following his death in 1682. So that means that he left it in his will or any other documents, but they're if somebody's pointing it out, it just seems like they just don't want to confirm certain stuff. But it looks like he also was either a sea captain or a sailor. As for the boy, there's no record of him during the Avery occupation of the site. Flesker says, noting that that's not unusual since children, whether of African or European descent, often were not listed in records because of the high childhood mortality rate. Yeah, and that's because they overworked them as well. This is a time, she explains, when land that eventually became the state of Delaware was considered a frontier. The area is simultaneously claimed by the colony of Maryland and colony of Pennsylvania and New York, confusing owners when both came looking for payment of taxes. People working the land, that's because it was Indian land. Pennsylvania, New York, and who else? Virginia are involved in some heavy Indian wars. And between Pennsylvania, Virginia, and North Carolina, and New York, the Tuscaroras, the Oneidas, some of the Algonquin, the Saponis, I think Yamasee, don't quote me on that. I think Yamasee stayed put in South and North Carolina. But they actually, during the wars, were forced or removed to New York. That's why you have many reservations in New York, because the Tuscaroras were pushed there, but the Tuscarora did not earn what do you call it? They were not considered or recognized as being civilized. They were not recognized. To this day, they're just now getting recognition in the past 7 years. All right, so there's a lot going on with that land. People working the land in Delaware, like those at Avery's Rest, would have had hard times. Delaware in the 17th century would have felt like it was in the middle of nowhere. This is very difficult. This is a very difficult place to live in this time. However, we will see the backbones of families farming or forming. People survived these locations because they were able to form biological family units. She continues, people should care about this because it is a hard look at the beginning of our colonial nation. We see that even then slavery was very apparent. Indigenous persons who once lived there were pushed out. What we see at Avery's Rest sets the foundation for later settlement, for the entrenchment of slavery, and for racial relationships going forward. Flesh says she plans to continue her research at Avery's Rest and next work to identify the 11 individuals found there along with their descendants. She states, I try to do my work in close collaboration with archaeologists, archivists, and bioarchaeologists to try to tell the whole story of who these people are, what their lived experiences are, and how that can help us understand colonial history a little bit better. Flex says archival documents can be very biased, and we already know that with the reclassification and taking a land and the reclassification of ethnicities, we already know that they're biased and the documents could be changed at any second based on skin color as well. They've written from the perspective of elite white males. Ancient DNA can help us read between the lines of those archival texts and help us understand the lived experiences of women, children, and people of African descent. And the fact that they keep lumping the African American in and not determining, we all know that North and East Coast land, North and Southeast Coast land was indigenous land. It wasn't African land. So everyone that they came across wasn't African. So I'm questioning a lot of this. Like I question, who is that? Jean Point du Savo. And when I dug further, because I actually thought that he would be Amerindian, I dug further and found out that he actually married a Potawatomi, the daughter of a chief Potawatomi. So I kind of guessed correctly that he was involved in the indigenous tribe, not necessarily of the DNA and ethnicity. His children are moving forward. At least two of them are, because he had a total of 8. That the indigenous is involved in a lot of these people that they are deeming to be African American. And we already know that the term African American was not adopted until Jesse Jackson stated that we were African Americans, even though he is of indigenous blood. So I don't, we know about the Indian Act of 1812, and we also know that Martin Luther King was in the midst of negotiating the Indian acts for the indigenous Aboriginal who have been reclassified to colored, Negro, Black, and now African American. All right. So those are 2 updates that I wanted to bring to you regarding 2 burial sites for quote unquote African slaves. And you see that this article says African slaves when they've already pointed out that he was a Black colonist. And the adjectives, they're going to continue to say this because some of them can't even, they get in trouble if they try to change that. I'm sorry, they try to change that verbiage around. You know, they have other people that they have to answer to. All right, so I am going to go ahead and close it out. If there were any in the chat, I could not see any chats going on. And during the chats, I would actually during the live streaming, and I appreciate any feedback, any questions or chats, anything you want me to point out, pull out. I wish that I had included the a virtual Google map to show the different locations with one the in Maryland with the Catoctin burial sites or the Catoctin Iron Furnace sites. And then now we have the other Maryland site. So this is two Maryland. Well, no, it's not. It's Delaware. I'm sorry. Delaware and Maryland sites where there are remains for um, the descendants connected to the descendants of today. All right. So I am going to go ahead and close this out. If you can go to my TikTok, you will be able to see any updates regarding, well, not necessarily any updates, but any postings that I have for the Catoctin Iron Furnace. I did several posts about it. I also did a couple of posts regarding Johnson, who was the governor of Maryland. So for that, on that note, I am going to go ahead and end this actual airing of the Catoctin Iron Furnace and the Avery Burials. And this will conclude it with this live streaming. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave those in the chat. I will answer them. I would like to thank those who have subscribed to the channel and who have been leaving messages and comments. So I really, really do appreciate that. We are 3 hours in. Two people, well, I'm very grateful and thankful for those that have stuck around and who there is a comment here. Let me see. Give me 1 second. Okay, now. So I wanted to say thank you. And if you can, please like, share, and subscribe to both the channel if you haven't already. I am at TikTok. You can go to My History Verified and subscribe there. Please visit my shop at www.myhistoryverified.com. There's t-shirts and mugs there. There's also an ebook, which is a video ebook, and I also have the actual PDF for beginners, ancestry, and genealogy research. What else did I want to point out? That is it. Don't forget my podcast. It's totally different from the live stream. The podcast is where I have uncut, don't care about grammar, don't care about how I sound, the voice, the tone, the tempo. There on the podcast, I am able to say and talk about the subjects I want to talk about. And then each platform, each actually airing has something very different involved. So I want to go ahead and say thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you on another time.